As a consultant, I've had the opportunity to visit a number of client locations and see the way different systems are designed, the best practices that are followed, etc. And just like how there are certain best practices that are followed, I've also seen certain worst practices that are followed quite frequently in every organization. And I often feel that this is the result of certain myths that are propagated over time, maybe legacy implementations where something that was supposed to be done in an older version of SQL Server is no longer relevant, but it's just kind of just cascaded forward without people really upgrading their skills or knowledge. The best example that I can give you is I've heard people say that performance tuning is not affected by partitioning, or basically that partitioning doesn't improve performance. Let me just give you this example here. I've already created a video about this. I'm not going to get into the details of it right now, so I'll just say partitioning performance SQL Server, and you'll see that everybody's got an opinion about partitioning and how it improves or degrades performance with SQL Server. But what I wanted to go ahead and show you here was that partitioning, just like every other feature, works properly when implemented the right way. If you don't implement it the right way, you can't really blame partitioning for doing a bad job. Now, when in doubt, either try it yourself or look at the Microsoft documentation to understand whether what you're doing is right or wrong. For example, in this case, this is the Microsoft documentation on partitioning and benefits of partitioning. You can see here they've clearly mentioned that your query performance may improve if you partition the table, keeping in mind things like the queries that you frequently run as well as your hardware configuration. There is a misconception among people that partitioning is just something that you do at the table level, but when you do it right, it includes table as well as disks, as well as the number of disks and the way that you place your NDF files and file groups on the underlying disks, in addition to other things like the speed of the disk, etc., etc. So the point I'm trying to make here is that you need to go ahead and stop copy pasting stuff off the internet or blindly assuming that what you read off the internet is true. The reason I'm creating this video is not really related to partitioning. I've obviously got a couple of other videos that I've created before, which you can browse the channel to find out. The myth that I'm trying to go ahead and address today is the one with regard to NOLOCK, something that's far more common in the environments that I visit. So the common example that people refer to when they say NOLOCK is that you can use NOLOCK as long as you're not worried about dirty reads. Right, so let me just go ahead and what is NOLOCK? Should I use NOLOCK? Let me just go ahead and put should I use NOLOCK? See what that throws up. Right, should I use NOLOCK? As you can see, very common question on the internet, and you'll see that what is NOLOCK, blah blah blah. Use NOLOCK if you're okay with dirty read. So there is this assumption that people make that the only reason why you should be using NOLOCK is if you want performance and you're okay with dirty reads. And that's something that I keep finding regularly. So you'll see that this is again slightly old. So let's understanding NOLOCK hints, blah blah blah, bad habits, putting NOLOCK everywhere, index corruption. Now all these things are relevant and definitely right, but the one that I wanted to kind of point out here is that people assume that the only trade-off that you have with using the NOLOCK hint is the fact that you're going to have some dirty reads, which is actually incorrect. There are other side effects. NOLOCK is a hint, and therefore, because it is a hint, it has other implications for SQL Server as well. Now, before we continue, I'm just going to go ahead and open this link up here. And this is the official Microsoft documentation about hints, where right at the very beginning, in red, they have mentioned that you should not be using hints as a first resort. It should be a last resort by experienced developers and database administrators. But that's not what I see when I go to client locations. Specifically, recently I was having a discussion with some database architects in a company in Bangalore, and they wanted me to tell them about concurrency, and I was trying to convince them that concurrency isn't something you just switch on or switch off. There are side effects pretty much with everything in SQL Server. There is some advantage and some trade-off with every feature. The example I gave them at the time was the fact that if you enable optimistic concurrency, you will get better write throughput on the underlying tables as a result of snapshot isolation. However, at the same time, because snapshots are being created, tempdb utilization blows up, and that can be a much bigger problem than concurrency on just one table. However, in this video, I wanted to address this very basic thing about no locks. So if you look here, I've created a query. I've got two queries here. They're basically the same except for the fact that one of them has a no lock hint and the other doesn't. This query is going to randomly pick up some data from a table and it's going to loop 1,000 times, and when it's done it's going to pretty much read every row in the table. So that's kind of what this query is going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this query up, and I'm going to copy paste it into my SQL server here, and I've got a table called logins. The table has about 2 million rows in it, so I'll just quickly show that to you. So it's not a small table, and again, the point I'm trying to make here is that I am not worried about dirty reads, and I'm not worried about read-write conflicts at the moment. I'm just showing you a very basic select statement and how its performance degrades when you put a no-lock hint. And the reason for this is because I've seen no-lock hints being placed everywhere in reporting queries without an understanding of whether what you're doing is right or wrong. So in this video, you'll see that basically I've just got the table, I've got the query, I'm going to run it, and it's gonna do its loop thing, and we'll measure the time. As you can see, I've got the start time over here, and I'm calculating the difference in milliseconds over here at the ending once the loop is completed. So as you can see, this query took about 12.8 seconds. I'm just gonna make a note of it so we can have something to refer to. Good idea when you're doing performance tuning, run the query at least 3 to 5 times so that you can average out any anomalous behavior like spikes or unexpected issues, maybe some background task running in the middle, etc. So again, you can see here this one about 14 seconds, so let's leave that there, and let's do one more iteration. Should be done just about now. So we got 12, 13 and 14, so I'm just gonna average it out to about 13 for now. So this query takes about 13 seconds, and this is the one with the hint. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get rid of the hint, so there's no hint over here at the moment, and we're gonna run this again, and let's see how long this query takes now when we don't put the query hint in the middle. There we go. So we got the first one, it's about 11.5, and already we can see it is definitely less than the ones that we had before, but again we need to average things out, so we're going to run this 3 times. There we go, 11.5. I guess by now you're probably convinced about how the no-lock hint is actually degrading performance in this case, and that is just for a basic select statement. There's really nothing else going on in the background, and you can see even a simple thing like a select statement, where you would think that, yeah, well, you know, we're reading it without a lock, so it's supposed to be better, doesn't actually pan out in the real world when we test the example. So with this, I hope you've kind of been convinced that using no lock is something that you need to be very careful about. It's not something you can blanketly use everywhere without any regard for the nature of the query or what you're trying to solve. And I hope this is one myth that I've busted with this particular query and demonstration. If you want to know more about why this is happening, I'll create a follow-up video if enough people have a need to understand that requirement as well. But hopefully you should be convinced by now that using no lock is something that has a number of side effects, and it's not just dirty read, which is the most common thing that everybody points out. There are real world performance implications to using no lock hints as well, and pretty much any hint for that matter. It's not just no lock, but in this case I just want to show you the most common hint that I encounter in the real world. Well, this turned out to be a bit of a rant, but I hope from now on you'll be careful what you copy paste from the internet. So thank you for watching, and have a nice day.